Jean Eugene Moran is the rear gunner of the B-17 Rikki-Tikki-Tavi and is the 29th of November, 1943. Bremen, a heavily fortified industrial city, is the target of more than 300 aircraft that are currently in the air. Everyone warily scans the skies with only 10 minutes to target when the inevitable call comes over the intercom. The German pilots are aware that if they can approach the target aircraft in a straight and level manner from the front, they will avoid being struck by the top turret gunner and the ball turret gunner. The formation is immediately approached by a staff of BF 110 seconds. They are transporting 21 centimeters Werfer granite mortar missiles, a novel weapon. A barrage is launched by the 110 seconds, which rushes toward the box formation of aircraft fortresses. First Lieutenant Linwood Langley, a 21-year-old aviator in the pilot's seat of Rikki-Tikki-Tavi, is unable to comprehend the situation as a rocket passes by the cockpit, narrowly missing him. The missiles were deployed initially, followed by the firearm. The BF 110 seconds are now within range and are firing with all of their might. Navigator 2nd Lieutenant Jesse Orison is prepared with the cheek cannon as the 110 seconds roar by. Jean is prepared at the rear and peppers the 110 seconds as they fly straight on and then peel off in pairs, but the adversary has already passed. He perceives tiny dots in the distance by squinting. Additional information is available. Jean has never witnessed such a number of German planes roaring in from above and behind as he exclaims. FW 190 seconds, the dreaded Butcherbird, and BF 109 seconds. The world is then engulfed in a whirlwind of tracer fire and whirling aircraft, resulting in chaos. The fort's floor is littered with empty shell casings, as all of the gun positions fire as much lead as they can at the adversary. The gunners are constantly announcing their positions over the intercom. Then a filthy cotton war puff is observed exploding in the distance. The atmosphere is obscured by 88mm flak. Some of the German aircraft break away, while others appear to disregard the flak and continue their assault. The B-17 seconds are tossed about as the shrapnel explodes in their vicinity. The American aircraft is struck and crashes. Moran is able to observe them dislodge from their formation and meander to the rear and below. The entrances of Bombay are currently unlocked. They anticipate the lead aircraft's deployment of their ordnance with anxiety. The explosives are released by Bombardier Donald Curtis, and it is out of sight. With the descent of the explosives, the aircraft experiences an immediate increase in weight and ascends. Langley turns and heads for home as the Bombay doors grate closed. The gunfire gradually and mercifully dissipates. I was astounded by the leadership. Fortresses are formidable. The crew experiences a sense of relief as the four motors appear to be functioning properly and remain unaffected. Another cry is raised before the echo of those words fades from the men's hearing. A swarm of hostile fighters is observed approaching from the sky. The enormous number of planes that are approaching them is the subject of all the men's attention. The Germans have returned to exact their retribution against Bremen. The entire box formation illuminates the sky as the thud of the guns and the crash of shells fill the hearing of every man on board. The formation is subject to seismic activity from all directions. In the conflict, fortresses are destroyed, but the crew of Rikki-Tikki-Tavi is too preoccupied to register. Jean aims at an FW 190 that flies by, followed by a BF 109. He is uncertain as to whether he has struck any of them, but he selects an alternative target and continues to engage in combat. The B-17 begins to gradually meander away from the formation as it is shaken by the impact of another volley. Jean observes that the distance between the primary group is becoming increasingly pronounced. He swiftly glances over his left and right shoulders. The engines do not emit any fumes. A B-17 inches formation is susceptible to the overwhelming number and velocity of fighters such as these. However, it is fatal when operated independently. The other gunners gradually connect to the intercom. There has been no communication from the commander, Jean exclaims into the microphone. The gap continued to widen. The message is then broadcast over the radio. It was unclear whether the captain or the co-pilot was responsible for this, but the B-17 was shortly abandoned entirely. The Germans identify Rikki-Tikki-Tavi's vulnerability and commence their lethal operations. The screams of males who have been struck are interspersed with the sound of gunfire. The commander and co-pilot remain silent as the aircraft maintains a steady course. Jean was often too emotional to provide detail about the subsequent events in numerous interviews. Nevertheless, the book Tailspin, which was authored by a close friend of Gene, asserts that Wilbur Pee Wee Provost, Gene's closest friend, screamed from the bottom of the bomber ball turret. "He is approaching us, this son of a bitch. He is rapidly approaching us. I have completed my task, my friend." Gene yelled for his companion, and he could hear the plexiglass dome shattering as shots were fired. The twin-engine Messerschmitt fighter soars up and passes the rear of the bomber directly in front of Gene's guns, and a scream is heard over the intercom. Gene fires 50 cals at the German fighter, and they hit their target. The stricken machine is obscured by smoke, and it disappears from view. The ball turret gunner never speaks again. At that moment, a Bf-109 approaches in close proximity. The German is aware of the B-17's arc of fire and remains just outside the danger zone, despite Gene's attempts to swing his weapons to the right in an attempt to eliminate him. Gene maintains eye contact with the aviator. Then the German gestures. He first points at Gene and then to the ground. Gene simply observes in response. Gene is then struck by the fact that he is being afforded an opportunity when the German replicates the gesture. An opportunity to withdraw. Was he the sole survivor? Were the remaining personnel either deceased or had they already departed? He can observe the other German aircraft that are waiting in the distance. This decision is essentially life or death. Gene would never have the opportunity to make that decision. The crack of gunfire shatters the temporary armistice. The German is being fired at by an individual who is still alive on Rikki-Tikki-Tavi. Gene has since forfeited any prospective alternatives. The Bf-109 abruptly rotates and vanishes. With that, the German planes move in en masse to administer the fatal blow. A hailstorm of metal fragments and shrapnel erupts from the tail section. Gene is hurled to the ground. He struggles to regain his position and attempts to discharge, but his gun is stuck in a jam. He appears to be operating on autopilot, and despite his injuries, he is able to work on the rifle. He is filled with optimism as he successfully discharges one of the firearms. Gene erupts in a cry of agony and pain as additional bullets strike the aircraft and him. Despite the two broken arms, he is able to fire a few more rounds before being struck in the chest, resulting in the fracture of several ribs. The tail gun position is currently a site of complete devastation. The aircraft accelerates and jerks in its final moments. Gene experiences a sensation of being forced into his seat as the aircraft begins to descend. His parachute has been deployed, but a spare is located near the tail tire. He can observe a portion of the personnel, but they are passively lying down. Metal tears accompanied by a gut-wrenching lament. He can sense the floor beneath him shifting as if it were pulling him backwards. He grasps onto anything he can and observes the sky emerge, followed by the main fuselage detaching from the tail. He frantically grasps the floor of the tail section and pulls with all his strength. He watches in horror as the Rikki-Tikki-Tavi sinks below him, screaming with agony into his mask. He remains in the tail section. In the nose section, however, Navigator Jesse Orison and Bombardier Donald Curtis fire their guns at the seemingly innumerable aircraft that are buzzing them. There are simply too many, and they are moving too quickly. Curtis is struck by bullets that penetrate the plexiglass, causing him to be pushed back into Orison. The aircraft is inclined downward. Orison is able to secure a parachute for Curtis before the entire plexiglass nose fractures when he wrestles with his limp form. Additionally, Orison is ejected from the aircraft. His legs are punctured by jagged glass. He collapses and screams in agony as he pulls the ripcord. He then observes the rear section of the Rikki-Tikki-Tavi. He recalled witnessing the elevator and rudder waver as it whirled and plummeted. He was unaware that his companion was still inside. At the very least, 3 individuals observed the tail dropping. Gene continued to fire as he fell, according to certain more fanciful accounts. However, Gene maintains that this did not transpire. The force of the rotation is tortuous within the tail. He is unable to move due to the air pressure and the speed of the spin, and his vision is obscured by a crimson mist as blood seeps into his eyes. The process of falling appears to be interminable. The tail continues to plummet. Eventually, it collides with trees with a force that is unreasonable for a living being to experience. However, Gene succeeded. Gene perceives a light at the end of a tunnel as a result of his impaired vision. He crawls toward the light. He experiences discomfort as a result of his fractured limbs, and can detect the looseness of his dental fillings in his mouth. However, he continues to progress toward the light. He experiences a tumble. He miraculously discovers himself on the forest floor. Rikki Tikki Tavi's tail section is suspended in the trees above him. He lies there for a brief period, feeling elated. Although he survived, he sustained injuries. He gingerly reaches up to his head with his broken arms. He is able to perceive the softness that lies between the huge crack in his cranium. He will soon be able to hear voices. He was somewhat apprehensive about the possibility of being murdered by the locals, who occasionally exact revenge on the bomber crews that have fallen, but he was encouraged by the sound of French spoken by the individuals. While recuperating at the POW infirmary, he is plagued by frequent nightmares, screaming, falling. Jean eventually recovered from his injuries and was released and repatriated after the war, along with his lifelong companion and only other survivor, Jesse Orison. 8 years following Jean's passing, his friend John Armbruster published Tailspin in 2022, which recounted Jean's narrative. We highly recommend this exceptional literature. Have you heard the story of the Border Gunner who survived a fall without a parachute?
Have you heard of the
Indeed,
ball turret
that is a
gunner
film
who
that
fell
should be
without a
viewed by
parachute
all.
and survived?